Hello, and welcome to This is Fertility. Today we have another special Fertility 101 episode for you, and this one is all about genetics. We'll be hearing from Jay Shaw, a certified licensed genetic counselor with Fulgent Genetics. I'm Dan Bulger with Progyny, and this is Fertility. Okay, let's dive in and set the stage. When we say genetic testing today, what are we referring to?
So genetic testing is normally a blood test. It can also be a saliva, buccal swab. There are a few other specimens that we can accept as well. What we're looking are the actual pieces of our DNA. So the 4 reading blocks that make all of our DNA, those are packaged together to make our chromosomes. We have 23 pairs, 2 are the sex chromosomes, the rest of we call autosomes. This will matter later when I discuss a little bit about carrier screening, because we focus on those 2 different ones differently. But the idea is that we are going to now process your DNA to try to see if there are genetic changes. We used to use the word mutation. We don't really like that word anymore. We normally say pathogenic variant, so a disease-causing change, or that you carry a disease-causing change that could affect another generation, even if it's not affecting your health directly.
Okay, so what is carrier screening?
So carrier screening is something that we recommend now to all people that are planning to have a biological child. Ideally to do it before you become pregnant, but lots of people also do this while they are pregnant. Both strategies work. So the idea is that we're looking for disorders that you most likely would not be affected with yourself, but it is possible to have an affected child. So this goes back to the different chromosomes I was talking about. So all of those 22 pairs of our what we call autosomes, those all have genes on them that we have 2 copies. One came from our biological mother and one from our biological father. So now you could have we call it again, genetic change, a pathogenic variant on one. You're completely fine because you have this other completely normal copy that compensates. So you're not going to be affected. But if you have you're a carrier for that one little genetic change, and the biological partner is a carrier for a change on that exact same gene, then the offspring would have a 1 in 4 chance, so a 25% chance to be affected with that condition. And the types of conditions that are normally on carrier screening, we call severe early onset conditions, so things that could affect a newborn as soon as they're born, or the beginning of life. So these are going to be very significant conditions. So we try to give people this information ahead of time so they'll have different reproductive options.
Brings you back to high school biology, right? Okay, so after getting carrier screening results, what are your options if something is found?
So again, different reproductive options. One, again, if you do this before the pregnancy, you have even more reproductive options. One of them we call PGTM, so this is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, where we're looking for the actual gene that now we know both reproductive parents are carriers for. So at this point, now we can actually pick the embryos that are ideally not affected and implant those. If we go past that one step, the next option we call diagnostic testing during the pregnancy. So either versus a CVS or an amniocentesis. They both sort of do the same diagnostic testing, but at different points in the pregnancy. And at that point, we can now do targeted testing for, again, that exact mutations that we know are in that specific gene that we're interested in that we knew ahead of time to see if the pregnancy is affected. Depending on ethical and legal options, any pregnancy can be an option in certain places and for certain families. Other options could also be if you knew ahead of time both partners are a carrier for the same thing, maybe egg or sperm donation and trying to have a different reproductive partner biologically is an option. Some people might choose to adopt instead. So there are different options available depending, like how you feel about this option. Again, and one is just to get pregnant naturally. You know that there is that chance. You can also do the diagnostic testing even if you intend to carry the pregnancy to term. And this way, now you know, doesn't need to be a cardiologist there right when the baby's born, because the baby might have a heart defect. So you can now give birth at like a tertiary care center that is going to have all the specialists that that child might need based on what type of condition you know it is.
Yes, it's best to get this information early so you can be prepared. Okay, so carrier screening is a prenatal test. But it's not the only prenatal test. Here are some other prenatal tests that genetic counselors can help with.
Other prenatal tests would involve, like I mentioned before, the CVS or amniocentesis. Those are diagnostic tests that can be done during the pregnancy. That would fall in that bucket. And then the newest test, it's not that new anymore. It's a decade old now. We call it cell-free fetal DNA. It's also called NIPS or NIPT. And this is a blood test that can be done on the person who's carrying the pregnancy. And we're going to be looking at specific chromosomes and sometimes single gene disorders that the pregnancy itself could be affected with that we can do in a non-diagnostic way. It's still a screening test, but it's non-invasive, which is why lots of people do appreciate this blood test. And that is still a prenatal test because you're finding out information on the fetus.
All right, one term that we throw around a lot around here is single gene disorders. We usually discuss this in context of PGTM, which can be used for embryo selection. But this is a great opportunity to get some clarity on what we mean when we say single gene.
So when we're talking about the single gene, we have over 20,000 genes in our body. And we definitely know that, these genes can cause genetic changes in us. Some are going to be things like it affects our hair color or our eye color. And then some of them can be linked with actual genetic disorders. So these genetic disorders, it's usually going to be one gene to one disorder that are related to each other. There are caveats to that, but sticking with this idea, some of the most common ones are things like cystic fibrosis or sickle cell anemia. Cystic fibrosis is a disorder that is related to one gene. So this one gene, it's on carrier screening. So you could do carrier screening and see if both partners are a carrier for this condition. And then if you did, you could just test for that one gene in the pregnancy. You don't have to check all 20,000 genes in the baby. You know that one gene that you're interested in. This can also be based on a family history of a genetic condition. Sometimes specific ultrasound findings in a pregnancy are linked with a specific disorder, so you can just know you're interested in that one gene and don't need to look at all 20,000 of them.
So that's single gene. What about the entire genome and what is known as mutation testing? What technology do you use to test that?
So when we talk about our whole genome, our whole exome, that's always going to be done with next generation sequencing technology. So we call it NGS. So this is the way that we've been able to do these tests. It drastically lowered the price for genetic testing, and we can do it quickly, looking through thousands and thousands of genes. Known mutation testing is different because we are looking at one specific spelling change in one gene. So you can do it through next generation sequencing. There's also another older technology called Sanger sequencing, and this is very targeted. So again, if parents are a carrier couple, you just want to look for that little spelling change in that gene. You don't want to look at the whole gene. Gene's going to have 1,000 different potential places for spelling mistakes. But you just care about the ones that came from the biological parents. Also, if there's a family history for genetic disease, this also has to do with hereditary cancer syndromes. You just want to see if that specific thing was passed down in the family. So you're going to look for that one spot of that one spelling error that you probably know your parents have or maybe a sibling has.
I asked Jay what some of the most commonly ordered tests are and what they're used for.
There are many different types of cancer that can be related to hereditary cancer disorders. The most common are breast cancer, ovarian cancer, colon cancer. Those are sort of like, we call it the heavy hitters in the cancer world of things that are very likely to have a genetic basis. Again, nothing's 100%, but right now the guideline, if any female has breast cancer diagnosed at 65 years or younger, they should at least have BRCA1 and 2 testing based on family histories, et cetera. When you're older, it can still be applicable. So anyone that sort of has suspicious cancers or multiple cancers in a family that are related reproductive organs, these are all reasons to go see a genetics professional. You can get evaluated. Being a genetic counselor, I will always recommend genetic counseling. This way you can sort of understand what the different tests are. Because when we talk about these single genes, we know some of these single genes, let's say, are really related to breast and ovarian cancer. But every lab, we have different size panels. So the really targeted ones that have the best evidence, we really know the medical management, And there might be some that are newly described disorders that, okay, we think there's an association with breast cancer, but we might not know as much about it. This is when you would love to speak with a real professional that can explain the benefits of maybe, let's say, this larger panel with some of the lower evidence genes, with the really targeted panel that we're completely positive, what your medical management is, what the guidelines are if you test positive. So there are definitely many different testing options available. Fulgent Genetics does have many different panels. There's also a different entire category of cancer testing that we call somatic. So what I've been talking about so far is the germline, a genetic change that you were born with, that's in every cell of your body in your DNA, that's leading to an increased likelihood to develop cancer. Somatic testing, we're actually testing an existing tumor to see what the genetic changes might be in that. And that's really beneficial because there are lots of precision medicine that's out there that's targeted to specific mutations in those tumor samples. So the actual treatment that an individual gets can be very targeted based on the tumor profile genetically.
Genetic testing is a way to get more information. And when it comes to something like cancer, early intervention is so important, and when combined with the targeted treatment that Jay just discussed, we're literally talking about life-changing information here. Okay, so genetic testing is hugely important, and for anyone seeking fertility treatment, it's definitely going to be something that will come up with your fertility doctor. But if this has sparked your interest, Fulgent does have a consumer product available as well.
So we do have two different sort of platforms. Our main one, Fulgent Genetics, a provider would order it. And then the provider would get the results and give it to their patient that they, should have a relationship with. We do have a different platform called Picture Genetics. And Picture is something that is consumer initiated. So we do have carrier screening. We have genetic wellness screening. So these are genes that are mostly cancer or cardiovascular. And we all have very specific medical management in place if someone tested positive. That is something that people could order directly for themselves. And then there is a physician that looks over the order and is involved but more internally, but it is consumer initiated.
Okay, so to wrap up, we were curious about what's coming up in genetic testing. It's one of those areas of medicine where things seem to move fast as we learn more and more.
So to me, the two biggest sort of hot topics in the genetics world, one is the whole genome sequencing. So like we sort of discussed, that one is going to be looking at all your genetic information, including the introns, the non-protein coding regions of your DNA. And right now it's used usually for people for diagnostic reasons, where maybe it's a child that has a condition that's not straightforward. We could do this larger testing to see if there's something really rare, or if other testing came back negative for smaller panels ahead of time, then we can try that. The other one is RNA. So far we've been talking all about our DNA. But when DNA is processed through your cells, it is changed into RNA. So these are now how the proteins really are functioning in your body. So RNA can sort of help us, okay, like with those variants of uncertain significance in your genes. Do they cause a problem or not? But if we can test the RNA and say, actually, this protein was never made properly, well, then we know that variant of uncertain significance could actually be disease causing. And then the idea is how to apply it. Right now, again, whole exome sequencing, whole genome sequencing, we're doing mostly, again, for diagnostic purposes. But to me, one of the avenues I feel like it's going to be most common in the future is, instead of carrier screening for, again, now 800 conditions, do carrier screening through whole genome for all of your genes. So it's not something that's, clinically available now, but someday in the future could be. So also having AI technology sort of help, especially with variant interpretation. So again, is that genetic change disease causing or not? That's the biggest question on people's minds. So right now, there have definitely been studies using AI for that, and it's almost as good as the variant curators who are experts in it, but not. But someday, if AI keeps learning, maybe it's just as good, and that helps people, helps the workload if it has this assistance through AI.
Yes, so stay tuned for more advances as they come, but we've already come a long way when it comes to genetic testing. This is information, and as we've discussed, this can be life-changing and even life-saving information. So please, don't hesitate to discuss this stuff with your doctor or with a genetic counselor like Jay. I want to give a big thank you to Jay Shaw from Fulgent Genetics for all the work that she does and for joining us here today. And I want to thank you for listening. If you want to connect with us, you can do so on Instagram at This Is Infertility Podcast. If you want to follow Progyny, you can do so at Progyny Inc. Of course, if you're listening on a podcast app, please leave a rating and review. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. This is Infertility is brought to you by Progyny. Please remember, this podcast is not intended to substitute for the personalized, expert advice of your physician. I'm Dan Bulger, and this is Infertility.